Assalamu alaikum. I will discuss the story The Contest, which is written by Annie-Proulx, who is an American novelist and short story writer. In her writings, she used to explore different physical and geographical backgrounds of her characters and of different locations. She also uses colloquial expressions for her characters, as is evident in the present story. So firstly, we will read briefly about the story, that what the story is all about. So we see here the writer focuses upon a community rather than an individual. So the second thing that we see is that the story depicts the people and their activities in a small place which is called Elktooth. And this is a humorous tale, and that is actually a kind of a satire on rural class, the rural class of a small town which is called Elktooth. And the people do not have many activities to do, therefore they start a beard contest in which everybody is interested and participating. Most of the people are participating in this contest, and they are very much interested in it. And we also see that the people have a lack of exposure to the outer world, and they are also not very much educated. And this is upon the entry of the outer world in the form of Mr. Ralph Cobbs, who's an important character. As soon as he enters the place, the most significant, which in that case is the beard contest, that loses its significance for the residents. So this is with the entry of Mr. Ralph Cobbs that the beard contest gets over without the announcement of any winner, because that was being understood that Mr. Ralph Cobbs is going to be the winner of this contest. The story takes place in a small town, Elktooth, and this is a small town where there are only 3 businesses, which were the Elktooth Bank, the Western Wear and Feed Store, only 2 businesses, and 3 bars, which are Peewee's, Muddy Soul and the Silver Tip. So that was a small place where there are 27 contestants who are taking part in the beard contest, including a 14-year-old boy. The story is written in the third person, and there are 2 important symbols in the story, which are books and the beard. So books are the very important symbol, because the books refer to the only way through which the people could make contact with the outside world, or through which the people could get to know about the outside world. And here what the people are doing with the books, though they are not very much educated, but they are spending their time reading the books. And what they are reading in the books, they are reading about the beards. So they want every kind of information about beards, and that information they could get only through the books. So because the focus of their conversation and attention is beard and related stories, therefore they wanted to read these stories from the books. And how much educated they are, or to their very little contact with the books, this idea could be seen through these lines, where they say the idea that there were shops devoted entirely to books would have astonished the Peewee crowd, except for Irving Hungate, who was a reader. So the people were very much astonished to see that there were the whole shops devoted entirely to books. That was the only library out there in that town. And they were astonished to see, when they had a look at the books and this library, they were astonished to see that. So this shows that they had a very little contact with the books, and they were not educated, and they are there only because of getting some information about the beards, because they were interested in the beard contest. Second important symbol is that of the beard, which represents the sense of dignity that the individuals have, and that is the only thing that could distinguish them from each other in their smaller world. And we could also see that everyone is obsessed with the beards, which also hints at the lack of activities that they have at their place. So beard is an important symbol in the story. Next we have a look at the theme. So we see the theme of independence, the theme of competition, the theme of relationship, because that was a smaller place. And the smaller the place is, the closer the connections are. So that we could see in the story too. lack of exposure and lack of education, determination, will, and isolation, because they were isolated from the outside world. So these are the important themes in the story which you could easily locate when you would read the story, and you could support this with the textual quotes and with the textual examples. So important character in the story is Ralph Cobbs, and this is the encounter with the Ralph Cobbs which was very much significant and a very important one in the story. Therefore I would be referring to that, and I will be discussing with you the character of Mr. Ralph Cobbs, who was a stranger from outside. He does not belong to Elktooth. He came from the outer world, and he was an educated person. He was a graduate and he was a teacher, and he was a retired fellow, and he had a plan to get settled in the place Elktooth. He had a tremendous beard to the awe of the residents of the place, and he had a plan to settle in the place. He became the reason for the end of this contest. So this was Mr. Ralph Cobbs, who ended, because of him the contest was ended, and this we are going to see how. And about Mr. Ralph Cobbs, there are some physical descriptions of Mr. Ralph Cobbs being given here, and this we could see on page number 433, and I have quoted the passages here. We see that it had grown in thick and had a tendency to curl. So they are talking about the beard, and this they are talking about Mr. Proulx's beard, and he was a potential contestant, and he was a fellow who would be having the chances of winning this contest. And he was sitting at a place when he had a look at the appearance of Mr. Ralph Cobbs. And here there is the description of Mr. Ralph Cobbs given over here, where they say that he was an overweight, there was an overweight elderly man who got off a silver bike the size of a short-legged horse, and he wore a bandana on his head. So this is the whole description. When you would read that he wore a bandana on his head and a red silk scarf and around his mouth, and how this whole physical description that's going to lead them to make some assumptions about the character of Mr. Ralph Cobbs, which later proved wrong. And then Proulx, he slowly grasped that he was looking at the tsunami of beard. So this was a moment when Mr. Proulx would have realized that this is the end of the contest, or he's not having any chances, or nobody from Elktooth has any chances of winning this contest, when he had a look at the tsunami of beard that Mr. Ralph Cobbs had. So next in this passage we see that how they were making false assumptions about Mr. Ralph Cobbs' origin, his background, and they all proved wrong later. And how they made these assumptions? They made these assumptions because of all these physical characteristics of Mr. Ralph Cobbs. That how did he look, that had made them to make some assumptions about him, that who he would be. And this paragraph, whole paragraph, is devoted to all those assumptions, that they are making ideas that he would belong to some place where there was a belt of eccentrics and oddballs, and then, or maybe he would be from Nevada, a state which featured heavily bearded men. So they were actually making assumptions about who he would be, because he was an interesting character and he was a representative of the outside world with which they have very little contact. And next we see that Mr. Ralph Cobbs' appearance does not match his educational background. And what is his educational background? This we are going to see on page 434, or a passage given on page number 434, and I'm going to quote, I have quoted it over here. And he was telling them that he belonged to New Jersey, and his father, Mr. Hayden Cobbs, and his mother, they both are educated fellows. His father was a successful limnologist, and his mother also served as a curator of Asian fabrics from the New Jersey Textile Institute. And he also did his graduate work in ergonomics, and he had been teaching for 32 years in various Eastern institutions. And it was only after his retirement that he had a plan to, he moved to Elktooth, and he had a plan to get settled here. So we see that how his physical description proved to be quite the opposite of his educational background, and quite the opposite of the assumptions that Mr. Proulx and his fellow would have made about him. So it was the arrival of Mr. Cobbs, and and the moment they had to look at is the tsunami of beard, that they realized that this would be the end of the contest. So though no winner of the contest was announced, because it was understood that if that would be announced, that would not be anyone other than Mr. Ralph Cobbs. So as this is given on page number, the line is given on page number 434, as far as they were concerned, the beard contest was over. So this was Mr. Creel and his friend who were thinking that to them this contest is over. And next we have a look at the significance of the title, that how much significant the title is. That is significant because the contest is the main event that the story revolves around. And the activity of the contest, this is the activity of the contest which occupies the people. They are not only actively participating in it, but they are also looking forward to win it, and all the time they are engaged with the conversation and with the things that have to do with the beard. So that is the thing that had actually made them busy. That is a thing that had given them something to look to, something to do. So that was very much a significant thing for the people of Elktooth. So next thing we see that this competition has also gained significance because it's being held in a place which is very small, where there are very few activities and sources of entertainment for the people, and that has a very little, or you may say no, contact with the outside world. So in that way we see that this contest is something that all the people are interested in, and that had kept them busy. And next we see that interestingly, this very significant event, which is the contest, that loses its significance at the arrival of a potential contestant who was Mr. Ralph Cobbs. You may see that this significant event loses its significance at the arrival of the outside world, with which they have very little contact and they are not aware about that. And as soon as the outer world enters, the event loses its significance. So that's how the title is also very much significant, the contest. And that's all, students. Thank you.